Welcome back to this Voiceflow tutorial. In this one, we're going to look at building a RAG system within Voiceflow. So let's begin. We will start by creating a new project. We can just say simple RAG demo. Create our project. Now, normally what we would do is that we would delete this, but I would like to show us something. Right, so with the agents provided by Voiceflow, right, you're able to also perform RAG with those agents. So if I click on this, you can come here to edit the agent. Now we can see the instructions that have been given to the agent, right? So you can see things like identity and purpose, voice and persona, speech characteristics, and so on and so forth. Now, if you look to the right, you can see certain tools like Zendex, Salesforce, Google Sheets that we've been using so far, then any custom API, and then any function that we might have written. Now, these are things that the AI tool can use, right? It can extract information from, and it can send information to. Now, we also have the buttons, cards, carousels here as well. Now, this is all well and good, right? But we're not going to touch too much on, we're not going to touch these agents for now, right? We can touch them in a later video, but I just wanted to show you that this exists, right? So you can also perform RAG here. So if you look here now, it says knowledge base, right? So this knowledge base is basically the vector database I explained in the last video, right? So it expects, so if you look here, it says knowledge base is empty, right? It expects that you must have uploaded your PDF file, right? Once you upload your PDF file to Voiceflow, your knowledge base becomes activated, right? And then you can reference that knowledge base in answering users' questions, right? So just wanted to show you that that's is something that is useful, right? And at the same time, you don't even need to do too much, right? With once the knowledge base, once you've uploaded your PDF file to the knowledge base, you can immediately start chatting with the chatbot, and it's able to give you answers, relevant answers that are relevant to the PDF file that you've uploaded, right? So that is one of the advantages of using the agents. Now, on that note, we won't be using the agents obviously, because we want to build everything we want from scratch, just so that we are able to understand the components, right, of Voiceflow. So we can delete this. Just wanted to show us that this was possible. Delete that and then minimize this. Great. So let me just zoom out a bit. Good. So now we need to upload our file to the knowledge base. So we can just come here to this portion here. It says knowledge base, right? I actually have two files in knowledge base already, but right now it's saying nothing. But if I reload, you should be able to see the files. Oh, I actually had nothing in the database, in the knowledge base. Well, that's fine. So we can add a file then, right? So for this set of tutorials, we'll be using a made up student admission handbook, right, for a university called Bright Future University. So that's what we'll be using. So you can add a source, right? Instead of using a PDF file or a Word document, you could have from a URL from a website, right? Or you could use sitemap, or you could upload a file, which is what we're going to use, or you could use plain text, which is something that you could type in, right? And Voiceflow would just reference that instead, right? But in this video, we're going to use files, so we'll just browse. So Bright Future Handbook, then import. Now, so you can see I added it to this all data sources folder here. However, I could have created a folder first. So if I said upload file, now once I browse the file I want, I could have done this, right? Then instead of just clicking import, I could have created a new folder, right? Create a new folder and it would move your file into that folder. But we're not going to do that here. Just wanted to show you. Now we can go back to our workflow. Now, so we can now make use of the knowledge base we have created using the knowledge base step, right? So now, before we proceed, I just wanted to point out that I don't know if you noticed how easy it was, right? But remember the schematic that I showed you, or the diagram I showed you? This first process is what we just did by uploading the file to Voiceflow, right? So all these processes here that I explained is what we just did with just a few clicks, right? So yeah, now we can basically ask our knowledge base a few questions and let's see how it responds, right? So let's say, what is the tuition for an undergrad, right? So we can decide to save these chunks, like the chunks that we're going to receive, right? Those chunks, if you remember from this explanation here, I explained that all these PDF files will be broken down into chunks, and those chunks will be mapped to vector embeddings, which will be saved in the vector database. Now, when we then send a question like the one I just typed in, which is what is the tuition for an undergrad, that question is converted into an embedding, and that embedding is, we run a similarity search against the vector database, and then the results, which will be the chunks now, right, of text which are from the PDF file that we uploaded, right? So now we are going to get those chunks in this case. So now if you look at this, we have the chunk limit, so we can vary the number of chunks we want, right? So we'll leave it at 3 for now, and then we can also set a variable. We can also set all those chunks of text that would be retrieved. We can equate them to a particular variable if we want, right? But for now, let's just run this to see what would be returned. Great. So now we can see it returns some information, right? But if you look at the portion of the PDF file it returns, it starts to mention tuition, right? Because it ran a similarity search and it saw the portion or the chunk that contains that information, right? So you can see it has given us that information right here, right? Okay, that's good. So you can see that was the first chunk, right? The first chunk was the one that contained the relevant information. The second chunk I don't think contains anything about, so I think it just contains contact details in case maybe you want to contact them about the tuition, but I don't think there's anything here again about tuition. So it's a pretty good retrieval, right? So it was able to at least get us the text that contains what we're looking for. Good. Now we can then infuse this into a particular workflow, right? So I think we can do that now, right? So we can maybe use a capture step. So what we will do is that we'll capture a question from the user, right? We'll capture a question from the user. So entity, we'll create a new entity. The name of the entity will be called question, and this should be of type key phrase. So now we can create the entity, right? So we can then maybe connect this here. So now that we've made our connection, we can then let's come here and edit this. So this will no longer be question. This will no longer be a hard-coded question, right? This will then be our variable called question, right? So since it's the user that would type in the question, so we don't need to hard-code anything here, right? So we need to save this chunk to a variable. So we can do that by creating a variable here. Maybe we call it knowledge base KB response, right? And then create the variable. So it saves it now to KB response. Now the next thing would be for us to send this. So connect these two together, right? And yeah, I think that's about it. So let's just run this now to be sure that it works. So we can just type in the question, how much is tuition for undergrad? Right? Okay, so we didn't print anything. That's why we have this here. So let's try to print this, the knowledge base response, right? So let's try to print that. So we just say knowledge base response KB response. Yeah, so this is what we ought to have done before. So we can just run this now. So how much is tuition for undergrad? So you can see this is the information that it was able to retrieve. All three chunks, right, are found here, right? So here's how it all looks like, right? So you can see knowledge base response, then colon, then you have your values. So that's basically how the knowledge base works. So as the tutorial progresses, we're going to build more things on top of this concept, and I hope it has made sense so far. I will see you in the next video.